The morning sun spilled across the city, turning everything golden. For the first time in weeks, there was no tension, no lurking fear, only a quiet sense of relief. Rozeena and I sat together in the small park near her apartment, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. She looked at me, a shy smile playing on her lips. Same. I never imagined life could feel like this. Peaceful, safe, happy. I took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth and strength in her touch. We've earned it, I said softly. Every challenge, every tear, every fear, it led us here. She laughed lightly, a sound that made my chest ache with happiness. I can't believe I almost let the past control my future. You didn't, I said, squeezing her hand gently. You chose to face it, and you chose us. That's what matters. For a long moment, we simply sat there, watching the world wake up around us. Children played in the distance, couples walked hand in hand, and life continued its steady rhythm. But for us, it felt different, like every heartbeat had found its perfect partner. Every fear had been replaced with trust, and every shadow of doubt had been banished. Then, with a small, determined gesture, Rozeena rested her head on my shoulder. Promise me something, she whispered. Anything, I replied without hesitation. Promise me we'll never let fear control us again. Promise me we'll face everything together. I held her close, feeling the truth of her words resonate in my soul. I promise, no matter what happens, we face it together. And in that quiet, sunlit morning, with the world moving around us and everything else fading into the background, I realized something profound. Love wasn't just about being happy. It was about standing by someone when the storms came, holding them through the fears, and celebrating the little victories together. Rozeena lifted her head, her eyes shining with tears of joy, and smiled. I think I finally understand what it means to be truly seen. You've always been seen, I said softly. And now we move forward, together. As we walked hand in hand through the park, the future seemed uncertain, but for the first time, it didn't matter. Whatever came next, we would face it, not alone, not afraid, but together. And somehow, in that shared strength, we had found the kind of love that could withstand anything. The next day, everything changed. I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was sharp, controlled, and unmistakably threatening. Saim, if you value the person in your life, you'll stay away from her. Otherwise, you'll regret it. My blood ran cold, but I knew one thing immediately. Backing down was not an option. Rozeena had already faced enough. She didn't deserve to be abandoned now. I found her at the small cafe where we often met, sitting with her head buried in her hands. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide with worry. They called? She asked softly. I sat down across from her, taking her hands in mine. Yes, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going anywhere, Rozeena. Not for them, not for anyone. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she smiled through them. You're brave, she whispered. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, I said firmly. We face this together, that's enough. Over the next few days, the threats intensified. Strange cars followed her, mysterious letters arrived, and whispers of her past reached my ears. But instead of fear, a fierce determination settled in us both. Every obstacle became a test of our bond, and every challenge strengthened it. One evening, as we walked through the quiet streets, she stopped suddenly. Saim, I've hidden so much of myself for so long, she confessed. And yet, you see me. Every flaw, every scar, and you still choose me. I looked at her, my heart swelling with emotion. Because you're worth it, Rozeena. Every part of you. In that moment, I realized something profound. Love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about a life without fear or threats. It was about choosing each other every single day, no matter what the world threw at us. And as we stood there, hands intertwined, I knew that whatever came next, we were ready. Together we could face anything. The city lights shimmered around us, but nothing seemed brighter than the trust and hope that had grown between us. For the first time, Rozeena and I truly believed that love, fragile, tested, and yet unbreakable, could conquer everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Every message, every glance, every fleeting touch seemed to carry weight, as if the universe had condensed our connection into moments too precious to waste. But life, as it always does, had a way of testing us. I was at the office one afternoon, buried under paperwork and endless meetings, when my assistant quietly approached me with a concerned look. "Saim, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent." Before I could ask more, Rozeena appeared in the doorway. She looked tense, her usual calm aura replaced with something fragile. My heart sank. Something was wrong. What happened? I asked immediately, rising from my chair. She hesitated, biting her lip. It's about my past, someone from my life. They're causing trouble, and I don't know what to do." My mind raced. The world outside our bubble had finally caught up with her. I took her hand gently, feeling the tremble in her fingers. "Rozeena, whatever it is, we'll face it together." She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You don't understand. They're powerful. They can ruin everything, and I don't want you involved. She paused, swallowing hard. "I just can't lose you too?" I pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. "You're not losing me, not ever. If they come for you, they'll have to go through me first." Her sobs were quiet, almost muffled against my chest, but each one pierced me like a knife. I realized then how much she had carried alone, all the fear, the threats, the pain. And now it was my turn to share the burden. The following days were tense. Strange calls, mysterious emails, and subtle threats began surfacing. But through it all, Rozeena remained by my side, hesitant yet determined. And every time doubt threatened to creep in, we reminded each other of the fragile trust and connection we had built. One evening, after another long day, we found ourselves sitting in silence on the balcony again. This time it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, charged with unspoken fears. "I'm scared, Saim," she whispered. I held her hand tighter. "So am I, but fear doesn't get to decide our story." "We do." And in that moment, amidst the city lights and the looming shadows of her past, I knew something important. Love wasn't about perfection, safety, or certainty. It was about choosing to stand together, even when the world tried to pull you apart. The days that followed were different. Every moment I spent with Rozeena felt like a quiet revelation. There was something magnetic about the way she carried herself, a mix of vulnerability and unwavering strength. I found myself noticing the smallest details. The way her hair caught the sunlight, the soft hum she made when she concentrated, the faint scent of jasmine that always lingered around her. But as much as our bond was growing, there was tension too. The world outside our small bubble wasn't kind. Rumors, assumptions, and the weight of our respective pasts threatened to pull us apart before anything could truly begin. I could see it in her eyes, the fear that she would somehow disappoint or be hurt or that life would just take her away. One evening, I found her sitting on the balcony, staring at the city lights, her shoulders tense. I joined her quietly, offering her my presence without forcing words. "Do you ever feel trapped?" she finally asked, her voice soft but edged with something deeper. I looked at her, my heart aching at the vulnerability she showed. "Every day," I admitted. "But sometimes, maybe we find someone who makes the walls feel less like prisons and more like protection." She looked at me, her eyes glistening, and for a moment I thought she might turn away. But instead she leaned in slightly, her hand brushing mine, sending a jolt through me. Then came the moment I hadn't expected. She whispered almost to herself, "I never thought someone would see me, truly see me." The raw honesty in her voice cut through every doubt I had. I held her hand firmly. "Rozeena, I see you. Every part of you, and I'm not going anywhere." The city below continued its hum, but up here, it felt like we had created our own universe, one where silence wasn't uncomfortable and words weren't always necessary. There was a fragile trust building between us, and I knew it would take time to grow, but it was there, undeniable and real. Later that night, as she left, she turned back with a small, almost shy smile. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I watched her walk away, my chest heavy with emotions I couldn't yet name. But deep inside, I knew one thing. Whatever came next, we were no longer walking through life alone. The next morning, the sunlight poured gently through the blinds, casting soft lines across the living room. I was sipping my coffee, still thinking about the conversation Rozeena and I had shared yesterday. Her eyes, so full of quiet strength, kept replaying in my mind. The sound of a knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone this early, especially not on a weekday. Slowly, I opened the door, and there she was, Rozeena, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, slightly out of breath. "I thought, maybe you'd like these," she said softly, her fingers brushing mine as she handed them over. There was a hesitation in her smile, as if she was unsure whether I would welcome her gesture, but I could feel the warmth in her hands and the sincerity in her eyes. I don't know what to say," I admitted, feeling my own heartbeat quicken. The world seemed to slow down around us. Every little movement she made, every subtle shift of her expression, felt magnified. She laughed softly, a sound that seemed to make the room brighter. "You don't have to say anything. Just maybe sit with me for a while?" I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. As she settled on the couch, the flowers resting between us, I realized something had shifted. The awkwardness, the fear, the walls we'd both held up, they were slowly starting to crumble. For the next hour, we talked. Not just the surface-level talk, but the kind of conversation that digs into memories, fears, dreams, and regrets. I learned about the small moments in her life that shaped her, and she listened as I shared my own. It was as though we were discovering each other for the first time, truly discovering each other. And then, as if the universe had orchestrated the perfect pause, she reached out and lightly touched my arm. "Saim." "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I met her gaze, holding her hand gently. "So am I," I said. "But maybe some things are worth the risk." In that moment, I knew something had changed. Not just in our connection, but in how I looked at life itself. There was a fragile hope blossoming between us, one that neither of us had expected, but both of us needed. We entered the boardroom, a long glass table, 12 leather chairs, and a city skyline so wide it looked like the world itself bowed down to Victor Halle. He sat at the head of the table, of course, his posture dripping with entitlement. His executives took their seats around him, never once acknowledging me. Except for one young man at the far end who kept glancing at me with an apologetic expression, as if he knew something wasn't right. Victor didn't even wait for me to sit. "So," he said, flipping through files without looking up, "you're the diversity consultant?" The words made the room go silent. I froze for half a second, not because I was shocked, but because he kept digging his own grave. I placed my bag down, pulled out my folder, and said calmly, "No, Mr. Halle, I'm the CEO of Grant Equity Partners." His pen stopped mid-air. Executives glanced at each other. Finally, Victor looked up at me directly, for the first time. "CEO?" he repeated with a mocking smile. "Of what, some scholarship charity?" My jaw tightened. He wasn't being ignorant. This was deliberate. "Of a global investment firm," I said firmly. "One your board requested a partnership with." His smirk faded. For a second, then he shrugged. Right." He leaned back in his chair. "Well, let's make this quick. We don't have much time, and honestly," he tapped his fingers on the armrest, "I am not even sure why we need this partnership." "It's more symbolic than necessary?" "Symbolic? As if I was some decorative checkbox?" I opened my folder slowly, placing a neatly organized stack of documents on the table. "Before we begin," I said calmly, "I need you to review these." He didn't move. His eyes narrowed at the folder as if it carried poison. "What is it?" he asked. I slid the first document forward. "Apex's internal asset transfer report illegal, unregistered, and catastrophic if exposed." "It's something your legal department should have filed 6 months ago," I said. The young executive at the end of the table stiffened instantly. Victor grabbed the file like it was an annoyance. But the second his eyes scanned the first page, his face drained of color. The room fell silent. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke. "Where did you get this?" I folded my hands on the table, maintaining the same calm expression I'd held since the lobby. "It came across my desk by accident," I said, "and I believed it was a mistake. Something you would want to correct before regulators noticed." Victor's breathing grew heavier. "Do you have copies?" He asked. Yes, I replied simply. Your board does too. The executives began whispering urgently. Victor slammed the folder shut. You had no right to distribute that? I had every right, I said. It affects my firm, my investors, and the businesses you strangled. He stared at me, panic slowly swallowing his arrogance. For the first time, he realized something. He wasn't in control anymore. I leaned forward slightly. Mr. Halle, I said quietly, today was supposed to be a partnership. I held his gaze. But after the lobby, after the way you disrespected me, I decided something else. His throat moved in a slow, terrified swallow. What did you decide? He whispered. That tomorrow morning, I said, I will present all of this to the Federal Business Commission. Gasps echoed around the room, and the moment I do, I gathered the files calmly, slipping them back into my bag. Your $3 billion in illegally held assets will be frozen. Victor stood up immediately, knocking his chair backward. You don't understand. This will ruin us. The calmness I had held since the moment he refused my handshake finally broke into a cold, sharp truth as I looked him in the eyes. You ruined yourself the moment you looked at me and saw staff instead of a CEO. I picked up my bag, turned around, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I said one last thing. By this time tomorrow, the world will understand exactly who you are. And without waiting for an answer, I walked out. My name is Sophia Grant, 37 years old, black, educated, overworked, and underestimated my entire life. And maybe that's why this moment hit harder than any other. It was 9:15 a.m. when I walked into Apex Global Headquarters, the glass towers gleaming so high they nearly sliced the clouds. I had been invited for a partnership meeting, one that could reshape everything, not for me, but for the hundreds of young entrepreneurs who never get a chance because people like him control the gates. I stepped into the lobby, holding my documents against my chest, breathing calmly. I wasn't nervous, I was prepared. Then he walked in. Victor Halle, 49 billionaire, the face of old money, and the man who thought the world belonged only to people who looked like him. He strutted toward me with a smirk, surrounded by executives who laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I stepped forward and extended my hand politely. Good morning, Mr. Halle. I'm Sophia Grant. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. He didn't shake it. He didn't even try. Instead, he leaned back with a small laugh and kept both hands shoved deep inside his pockets like I wasn't worth touching. Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he said, I don't shake hands with staff. His executives chuckled. Employees nearby stopped and stared. Someone even recorded. My hand was still extended when the words hit me like a slap. Staff? I was the CEO of an investment firm with 7 global branches. I had funded over 60 minority-led startups, and I was the one Apex had begged for a meeting with. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Because to a man like Victor, my skin erased everything else. I slowly lowered my hand, steadying my breath. His arrogance didn't surprise me. But the public humiliation, that I would never forget. Let's begin the meeting, he said dismissively, walking ahead without even looking back. I followed, my steps firm and silent. What he didn't know, what no one in that lobby knew, was that in my bag, sealed inside a folder marked confidential, was something that could shatter his empire in a single morning. A file that had crossed my desk by accident. A file that proved Apex had illegally locked out small businesses and diverted $3 billion of assets without legal clearance. I hadn't planned on using it. I believed in partnership, not destruction, but after this? After his insult? After the laughter? After the eyes watching me like I was nothing? I promised myself one thing. He would remember the day he refused to shake my hand. And by tomorrow morning, his entire $3 billion empire would be frozen.